So then it wasn't like, so we talked it all through.
Right.
And then, so when we first interviewed, everyone made their notes on that scoring, kind of gave a tentative scoring, and then we spent one night where we just sat there, talked through that interview and all the notes, and everyone then finalized their score. And it was good that we did that, because when the board said, well, how was that person selected based on, because we went through what the process was. And they said, can you tell us the scores? So the person that did all of that, she looked at me, and I just kind of, she said, well, I can't give you the exact scores, I'm not going to do that. But I will tell you that the candidates recommended scored highest. And then there were two very close, that each three, but she stood out with, really quite interesting.
That's such an awkward question. I mean, it's such an awkward situation to begin with, but to be asked that question is sort of like, the specificity of wanting to know everyone else. I mean,
and they could have come to all of those interviews themselves.
Right.
They saw what we were doing. They could have taken down.
My question is, what I was told was that during the process there would be no talking about school.
Yes,
How do
that's the
you
disclosure.
control that if it's open to the entire board?
Because the board members have to sign, and we.
Right, so if the board member comes, they have to sign.
They have to sign, and there were people that came to every single one, and they signed every time they came. And then I had to hold it. And she was like, so I did the board. I said, I'm sorry, I signed. She said, oh, I signed a non-disclosure.
You know what this reminds me of the process to become a principal or an assistant principal.
Okay.
Because I had to do that at PS 174.
Yes, I worked at PS 50.
Okay, so it's like you have all the, and it's so weird because I come from corporate recruiting.
It's very different.
Oh my gosh.
I worked.
So I have to like pivot my brain.
I worked HR at Verizon.
Okay. Yeah. It's just such a.
Yes, very, very good. But that's what I
All righty, good evening everyone, and we're going to get started. I want to thank all of our community board chairpersons and Borough Hall staff who are with us here tonight. I think we're joined by City Council members, City Power representative as well. Just give some brief updates, Betty. I'm going to give some, we started. It's a busy. So we have closed our community board application process and proud to announce that we received over 592 new applications and 840 overall applications, which is good. I mean, they were going for breaking the record again, but we don't have that many spots anyway, so it's, but I want to thank all of the boards for certainly assisting with that and getting the word out about the application process. And of course, we will be deliberating and with our city council partners who I've started to meet with today to go through the application process. And most importantly, we want good people who are going to show up. So we're striving to ensure that that happens. And I want to thank everyone in this room for their service, of course, and your hard work and spreading the word throughout your communities. And if you do have any questions, our community board director is here, Khalil Bragg, and he's certainly here to answer any questions after the meeting. Before we get into our presentation, I want to congratulate and welcome our new Community Board 1 Chair, Evie. And Evie has been serving on the board since 2010, really? Wow. We want to thank you for your service and welcome you to your first Borough Board. And once again, I've known you throughout your tenure, I guess through my tenure as Borough President. We're really happy to have you on board and look forward to the work ahead, of course, of improving your board. I also want to thank both CV 6 and 9, am I right?
Yes.
For Borough Hall on Your Block. I thought we had a really strong week, and we look forward to the continued work because follow-up is key for us on many of the issues that came up and apprised themselves to us over the course of Borough Hall and New Block. And we'll be announcing where our next location is, certainly as we plan out. But I want to thank you all for your hospitality and consistency in getting the word out and helping us really work with the agencies through issues. So thank you all. This evening we will receive a presentation from the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. I was happy to recognize them. It was a commitment I made when I ran for Borough President that we would actually recognize this group. QSWAB is made up of a diverse group of residents, business owners, civic leaders, and advocates who are committed to working towards a greener, cleaner, and more equitable future. Each community board has a designated spot, if you didn't know, on QSWAB to represent local concerns and bring back information about solid waste issues that may impact your particular communities. This presentation will give an overview of QSWAB and highlight ways that they can strengthen their relationship with each community board. And they're really a good resource for you to have if you have questions around environmental policy, around things that are coming up. They're really a great resource. Here to present on behalf of QSWAB is their Sergeant at Arms, Susan Latham. I want to welcome you, Susan, and thank you for all of your work, and most importantly, the work that we all have to do, especially to get ahead of climate change, and we certainly are behind. And I don't have to tell you about the projections that just came out I think this morning or yesterday on the dangers of rising tides, the dangers of heat. We in Queens obviously are on the forefront of many of these challenges, so every little bit counts that we do, and I really want to thank QSWAB for helping us lead the way. So I'll turn it over now to you to present.
Thank you, and again, I'm Susan Latham. I'm the Sergeant at Arms of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I'm really happy to be here representing the group tonight. So, I guess the first question is, what is the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board? And I wanted to give you some background. As the Borough President just said, we are a diverse group of Queens residents. We're all volunteers. We represent every part of Queens. Our group includes business owners, employees of recycling industries, carting industries, civic leaders, environmental organizations, and advocates, and we are all committed to working towards a cleaner, greener, and more equitable future for Queens. We serve and advise the Borough President, as well as city and state elected officials, community boards, and anyone in Queens who's interested in topics related to solid waste, recycling, resiliency, and environmental equity. The members of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I will call it QSWAB, we are all appointed by the Borough President with input from local elected officials, and we serve two-year terms. Community board members, as the Borough President said, all have a designated member, and so we have a lot of community board representation on the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, including some folks who are with us here tonight. We have no less than 20 members, and we are eligible for reappointment at the conclusion of our terms. So a little history. The original Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board was founded in 1985 when recycling came to New York City. The city passed the Administrative Code Title 16318, which created a solid waste advisory board in each borough. And these citizens boards were charged with advising the borough presidents with recommendations on how to promote, encourage, and increase recycling rates across New York City. From 1985 to 2011, QSWAB was active, but at a certain point, the group became inactive. And really, there was no activity for several years until January of 2018, when a new group of Queens residents and environmental advocates began meeting. They were all motivated by a desire to ensure that the borough of Queens was contributing to the broader New York City conversation about how waste can be seen as a resource. And when I say committed, this was really a group of very committed people calling themselves the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Committee. They began meeting monthly at we began meeting monthly at various locations across Queens, which included people's apartments, at bars and restaurants, at nonprofit organizations, wherever we could find a place to get together to meet. We moved to Zoom when the pandemic hit, and we began advocating for an official charter of QSWAB, which came to fruition in spring of 2021 when Borough President Donovan Richards formalized the group and appointed members, and thank you again. We had a lot of help with putting together our charter and bylaws, and a lot of assistance from the Borough President's office. There are no written records from the earlier QSWAB, but we were able to interview members of that group, and those discussions helped inform the present group's focus. Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board supports the goal outlined in One New York City to send zero waste to landfills by 2030 through reduction, reuse, recycling, and redesign practices. Especially considering that this is 2024, that's a really ambitious goal. And a little further in the presentation, we'll talk about diversion rates and how much waste we are diverting from the landfills right now. We have a long way to get to zero waste by 2030. At our monthly meetings, we learn from guest presenters about best practices and innovations around solid waste management in other cities and municipalities, how waste is sorted and managed in New York City, where our waste goes and how it's transported after pickup by the Department of Sanitation, how different types of waste affect the environment, how some communities are disproportionately and unjustly impacted by waste management facilities, how businesses manage waste flows, and most importantly, how QSWAB can help address these issues through education, outreach, and advocacy. So New York City does not yet have a fully functioning, sustainable, and equitable solid waste system. We're still sending millions of tons of recyclable waste, by which I mean paper, cardboard, glass, metals, plastics, all the things that we should be separating from our trash. We're sending that to landfills and incinerators, which has negative consequences for climate change and pollution in our communities. The city's diversion rate, which is a measure of the amount of material diverted from the waste stream that goes to recycling programs, has been steadily stuck at 16 to 18% for decades. Organic waste, which is suitable for composting, like food scraps, yard waste, Christmas trees, makes up approximately 1/3 of the waste stream. And diverting that material from the trash to the compost bin will be the most meaningful strategic effort to increase the city's diversion rate since the start of standard recycling 20 years ago. It also helps our environment because when it's sent to landfill, organic materials emit methane and other harmful greenhouse gases. So diverting it from the landfill potentially allows us to really stop the level of methane that is being emitted right now. So I thought it would be helpful to see some statistics about trash in Queens. This is my trash talk part of the session. In New York City in 2023, almost 3 million tons, excuse me, is that right? 3 million tons of trash was disposed. About 300,000 tons of paper, cardboard was recycled. 288,000 tons of metal, glass, and plastics were recycled. And 32.7 tons of organic waste was recycled, including food scraps, yard waste, Christmas trees. Other waste, including textiles like clothes or tablecloths or towels, as well as electronics, furniture, paint, and other hazardous materials, are diverted from landfills, and that's usually through special events that happen. There is no one standard way of doing that except by these special events that happen in most community districts once or twice a year. Which sounds really good. So it looks like we're doing pretty well in terms of getting, diverting some of our recyclables and compost out of the trash stream. But when you look more closely at the diversion rates, recyclable materials only comprise about 17% of waste diverted from landfills citywide in fiscal year 22. So this gives a little more context in terms of how Queens rates with the other boroughs. And as you can see here, Queens has a diversion rate higher than most of the others. We're at almost 20%, 19.9%. And you can see, looking at the various community districts, who has the highest and the lowest rates of of trash and, of recycling and compost diversion. So you can see that the areas that are yellow and green are at the higher end, and the areas that are at the purple and red end are at the lower end of the spectrum. We're doing a lot better than the Bronx, which is at 15.4%. We're better than Brooklyn. We are better than Staten Island, but we lag behind Manhattan. And one of the things that differentiates us from Manhattan is that Queens has a lot more land, backyards, and single-family houses, which produces a lot of organic waste, leaves, branches, etc. So we track these rates by community district, not to blame the community districts with the lowest diversion rates, or to let the community districts with the highest rates off the hook, but it's so that we can continuously improve the diversion rates. If we know that an area is falling behind, we can increase our efforts at educating people about how they can divert more trash out of the landfills. And I say landfills, but the reality is that there is no place in New York City's 5 boroughs where trash goes. We don't have a landfill. Fresh Kills was closed a long time ago, and right now all of our trash is sent to other locations. It gets sent by barge, it gets sent by trains, it gets sent by trucks, and it gets sold to other municipalities, sent upstate. Our plastics sometimes go to other countries, and so all of that takes additional energy to get rid of all of that trash. And what we really need to be doing is focusing on how to reduce how much trash we're actually making. So in 1985, when the law creating the SWABs was put into effect, there were SWABs created in the other boroughs. And we work very closely with our partner SWABs in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx on a variety of waste issues. Staten Island, that right now, does not have a functioning SWAB. We share information and data. We consult with each other about what's happening in our boroughs and citywide. Our legislative committees work together on policy recommendations and advocacy around current issues. Right now, one of the most pressing priorities is the Save Our Compost campaign, which has a goal of restoring funding to the community composting program, which was defunded with the November 2023 PEG, or Program to Eliminate the Gap. So I want to talk a little bit more about community composting and the Save Our Compost campaign. The community composting project is a program started by New York City, funded through the Department of Sanitation, and it includes a variety of groups, including Grow NYC, Big Reuse, the Queens Botanical Garden. You can read the entire list here. But these are all organizations that have been working at the community level in a variety of ways to educate people about composting, train people to be composters, and also collecting organic scraps for composting. So collectively, the New York City Composting Project has served millions of New Yorkers. They have helped divert more than 8.3 million pounds of organic waste from landfills each year. They produce and distribute hundreds of thousands of pounds of compost to over 325 community groups, parks, 85 street care events, and thousands of individuals each year. They engage over 1,000 yearly participants in master composter activities through food, farming, and composting opportunities across the city. They provide compost outreach and education to over 600,000 New Yorkers annually, making them aware of food waste's contributions to the climate crisis while providing the opportunity to address this critical issue. They also operate 6 community composting sites, providing the most sustainable and equitable form of organics waste management. New York City's November 2023 budget cuts eliminated the entire New York City Compost Project, which cost about $3 million annually, or 10% of the city's entire composting budget. Cutting community composting and outreach programs has resulted in the elimination of these invaluable services and the loss of over 115 green jobs. Community composting programs transform New Yorkers' waste into valuable resources providing essential soil for our parks, gardens, and playgrounds. These programs serve as a crucial tool in combating climate change. Furthermore, given the anticipated delays in the expansion of the curbside composting program, the success of the initiative in New York City hinges on a robust outreach and community composting network to educate and engage residents. Now, I'm just curious, do people, could you just show me, can you raise your hand if you compost? Okay, so we have several people who do. Can you raise your hand if you recycle on a regular basis?
We have to, yeah.
Well,
We don't have any choice.
we do have to, but a lot of people don't. And for composting, which we haven't had to, a lot of people don't. I've been composting first in Woodside, then in Jackson Heights for like 30 years. And it was really great when the farmers markets began having compost pickups, which were all done by the community composting groups. And so that's one of the things that will disappear because of the elimination of the community composting project. So one of the things that community boards can do is to help us amplify the message about saving community composting program. And I put here a petition, the Save Our Compost petition, which we would love if you could share with your community boards and ask them to sign. Your community board could pass a resolution or write a letter in support of community composting and send it to the mayor and all of your local elected officials. And you could amplify the Save Our Compost social media efforts by sharing it with your constituents. This is an issue that the QSWABs collectively have worked tirelessly towards since we heard about the budget cuts in November. And we've really worked in unison, all of our legislative committees together, because collectively we have a larger voice than individually, and we're all working towards the same goals. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how your community board can work with the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. As the Borough President said, each community board in Queens should have a representative who sits on the QSWAB, but there are a few that don't. And if your community board doesn't, we encourage you to appoint somebody. If there are waste issues that are impacting your community, please let us know. And you can amplify our efforts by sharing information from QSWAB about pressing issues like the Save Our Compost campaign. We have a lot of people on the community boards right now. We understand how it's a heavy lift because as a community board member, you have a monthly meeting, and as a QSWAB representative, you also have a monthly meeting, and that's a lot to commit to. But we really encourage that your representatives attend our meetings and actively participate in our meetings and committees and report back to the community board so that you can find out what's happening at the QSWAB level. And then in terms of how QSWAB can work with your community board, we would be happy to do presentations to your community board. The information that I showed you about diversion rates for trash, that's something that we can pull together information about your community district and share information about recycling, composting, and trash, just so that you can see how you are doing in comparison to other community boards and community districts. And it's a way that you can kind of benchmark for the future if this is an area that you are, if this is an area that you would like to focus on. We also, again, would like to encourage more participation in recycling and curbside composting, and we can provide you with information about how to make that possible in your community districts. And then we're completely open to other ideas that you have about ways that we can be helpful to you. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
I'll go to Dolores Thorpe, CB14.
Thank you. So CB14, I know we don't have anyone on.
Wait, Laura, we can get the mic.
CB14, I know there is no one on there, and we have the lowest rate of composting. And can you first tell me when is it the same day of the month, the first or last or whatever?
It is it's the third Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
And if you go to our website, which is right here, you can go to the calendar and it shows you the dates and there's a Zoom link. And all of our
Yes,
meetings are
okay.
virtual,
Yeah,
and
I saw it was Zoom, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think, and one of the challenges in Rockaway, I used to, every Saturday, I live in an apartment building, and we have many apartment buildings, and I'm not aware of any that are providing opportunity for composting. And I used to save all my scraps and bring them to the library, and there was someone, I forgot what organization, and every Saturday I would drop off my composting, and that has stopped. So I don't believe there's a single place in Rockaway, unless you're in a single family home. Are you doing it, is everyone doing curbside?
yes, curbside composting became the law in March of last year.
Yes,
And-
I just
And
didn't know.
Queens was the
of
first.
Queens, that's
Yeah, but I just didn't know with the budget if it was still going on, was this is suspended. But that's not a requirement for high-rise buildings.
It is a requirement for high
Well,
rises.
my building does not compost, and I don't know
And
anyone.
I would argue that a lot of the buildings out there don't.
I would say, I
I would
don't,
agree.
nobody.
Neither the nicer sites,
Yes.
right?
No, there's no way that anyone any buildings out in Rockaway is composting.
And I have to say that one of our master composters, I believe, lives in Far Rockaway. I don't know, Evie, do you know, is Gil? He lives in Far Rockaway, I believe.
Gil lives in Astoria.
He's in
Unless he
Astoria?
moved to Far Rockaway,
We
yes.
have somebody who lives in Far Rockaway, and I can't remember who it is, but on our QSWAB. And I mean, in the past, what we would be able to do is say we could reach out to one of our community composting partners
Right.
and have them come and do a presentation, but that budget has been cut. And I know that there is a lot of information through the Department of Sanitation, since they're the ones that are doing the pickups. It should be happening in apartment buildings, and so that's where, and I understand it's not. There's still a lot of education that needs to happen, and even 20 plus years after recycling, we still don't have full compliance with recycling either.
Believe me, I know. I live in my building, I shift everything and take stuff in and wash it.
And I think that, I mean, that's something we should talk about,
Yes, how do
maybe.
we
And
do
I
it?
think on the community composting side, is there an organization, are there focal points? And that's all a funding question, so I think that's gonna be the big fight, is how do we get
So
the community
sanitation-
composting restored? And then how do we find dollars to make sure that we have an expansive project on the peninsula?
Right, so sanitation would be able to provide information to us, or through you?
Well, you can go to us, but most of our information would come from DSNY. They were providing all kind, and they still have quite a bit of literature on their website, where it's information about what can be composted, what can't be composted.
Okay, I'm gonna turn this over to my environmental committee to get going on it. Thank you. There's only one that-
And CB12 did really well on composting. Southeast Queens, I think, had exceeded the numbers. So it shows if you build it, people will use it. You know, we did have that gap when there was uncertainty, and I felt like it hurt some of the momentum. So now it's about making sure that we try to build that momentum back up, because I definitely see less composting bins. When there was that level of uncertainty whether we were gonna continue the extension, but it clearly was successful in Queens. So we still have a lot more work to do on the education side.
Exactly, which is the concern about, and it's the purpose for the Save Our Compost campaign, is that Queens is the first borough that has curbside composting as the law. And it's being extended to each of the other boroughs, but without the ongoing community outreach that the community compost organizations were doing, there's concern about whether or not people will know that it's happening. And these are organizations that did hundreds and hundreds of compost bin giveaways and workshops on how to compost. And without that round group of committed people who know what they're doing, there is concern about how compost will, and the whole compost rollout, will succeed in the coming years.
I'm with Community Board 6. We have some big time big time composters, the Forest Hills Green Team folks are always kind of reminding us, I mean, they are on it. We actually have a resolution for community composting on our agenda for March, so that hopefully should be coming. I don't see any real obstacles to it. And one of the problems is the same, you know, we have tons of buildings, and I think the problem is there's no enforcement, you know, and I think the lack of enforcement is part of the problem. Like if simply there isn't a brown bin full of composting out back from your building, that should be a fine. I think it should be a fineable offense. My building has it, but they put it in the back, they use it for storage. And I know that my building is far from unique. One of the things I think might help is the smart bins. Now, I'm not sure how successful they've been in Astoria. I was there yesterday and I saw a whole pile of trash on one on the corner of Broadway underneath the train. So some people don't understand that they're not just trash bins. But I'm wondering in areas that are dense with buildings, if we could put these smart bins in so that you can just, you know.
Yes, I read about that, where you put a code.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because for people like myself, I can only keep so much in my freezer. I've got a family of four, and two of them are teenagers, and you know how that goes. And so trying to keep up, and there were times when I would actually lug it into Union Square for myself personally, because I couldn't always make the Sunday market, right? But that would be great if we could get smart composting bins along Queens Boulevard specifically, and maybe even sections of Woodhaven Boulevard. I'm just thinking of main thoroughfares, maybe Metropolitan, just main places where people would be walking to anyway, where they could just drop it off on their way to work or to synagogue, whatever. The other thing is, we used to have at the Green Market a textile recycler. And since COVID, we have not seen them return. And I know there are some buildings that have those bins, but it might be nice if we could get more outreach on those bins that you can put in the back of buildings, that buildings can just have for that. But I also think it would be great if we could have this kind of be a part of green markets in Queens, where we can at least, even if it's just once a month, have them there. Because, you know, again, teenagers, they don't necessarily, you know, I can't necessarily donate clothes that they've grown out of because they busted them up. So, but I can take them and get them recycled instead of, you know, throwing them out in the garbage. So that would be a nice thing to see return to our green markets. So
I totally agree with you. I've had the same issue. What I can tell you, and that's a great idea about seeing if there's a way that we can get textile recycling back. I can tell you that if you go to the Department of Sanitation's website, you can sign up for them to put a bin in your building if you have more than 10 apartments to collect textiles, and then you have to reach out to them when the bin is full. And you can do the same thing for electronics recycling, although it's a larger number of apartments, minimum
We
number
have
of
the
apartments.
electronic recycling in my building.
And these are ways, you know, there have been a variety of ways that the Department of Sanitation has come up with to try to reduce how much trash is going into landfill somewhere. And so they've come up with a variety of things. It's about getting that information to people.
yeah, I agree.
And I'm going to look right now while I take the next question to see if I can find the specific site for textile pickup.
I just wanted to add that sanitation got a $2 million grant from the EPA to do outreach, and I'm just not sure where that is and if that's happening.
Yeah, we're
yet,
gonna
what their
have
plan
them, I
is.
think we're trying to have them at Borough Board, I think next month, for the month after, the following month. So we will certainly raise these concerns with them when they come in, find out where they're at.
Any other questions?
I put some information again at the very end of the presentation. If you go to our website, you can get in contact with us. I do just want to remind everybody that we are all volunteers with day jobs, and so if it takes a while for us to get back to you, please understand. And I'm looking here about textiles. If people are interested, they do have textile collection bins through the Department of Sanitation. And you know what? And if you can give me, do you mind giving me your email address?
I do not at all.
And then just put it right on there, and then I can send it to you because I'm not finding it right now. thank you all very much.
And the less waste, less trucks. One of our number one complaints in the borough. But I will say, I want to thank QSWAB because it was really through their advocacy that we worked extremely hard to get Queens to be the first place where the, composting was piloted, and DSNY uses us as an example. I think they're now rolling out in Brooklyn next. So they're working on that, but Queens is the blueprint. We led the way on it. So still a lot more work to be done on the education piece. I'm definitely interested in seeing those CB14 numbers come up, because once those come up, then we'll beat Manhattan, the outer borough Manhattan.
Okay.
So we got work to do. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Can I just ask, is the sanitation, does enforcement go around to look for composting?
They haven't really, in my opinion,
Or
done
at least to educate?
real enforcement yet, but I know that will eventually come.
All right, I'm gonna see if our super will do an education now.
And if I can make one more comment,
Sure.
I live in Jackson Heights. I'm in one of those, there's a court and there are 11 buildings. And every building on that court is composting. And part of it is because I nagged everybody. I sent information, I reminded people, I went to each building. And that's how, and now everybody does it and everybody's used to it. But that's how.
Now, let me ask you, how do you, so is there a bin in the front of the building, or is it like individual responsibility? Because I know you can't put all these bins out from every apartment in a place like, where Dolores is at.
We have a small bin and it's in the basement of our building where
Okay.
all the other recyclables are kept. And
Okay.
then we keep trash, compostable things in the freezer until we go down to take out the trash.
Right.
And then people in the building bring the bin back in. There have been times where we've had, especially around holidays, where we filled up more than one bin. But we've really gotten a lot, and Jackson Heights is a community where I think we have the highest rates of scrap drop-off at the farmer's market for years, partially because of density of the neighborhood, but people have been trained to do it because of the community composting project, and then it was
Route 14
about.
doesn't have any of that available to us. We have to leave the island and travel halfway across the borough, and people are just not gonna do that.
And I'm thinking there are some points, like even as Arbonista's done, we got the acre of the farm, like can that be a natural place where people can drop their
Yes, but
scraps,
that's several
right?
years, that's,
Yes, they're working on it now, but I'm just saying, but I'm thinking of like where particular sites we can put those bins can be central focal points. So that farm is under construction now, so.
Absolutely, yeah. We're
I mean,
excited about
Yeah.
that.
All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns on anything? And I'm thinking maybe, if it's okay, if somebody wants to put a motion out, we could do a resolution as a board as the borough board on the community composting. Anybody got a motion?
I'll make a motion that
I'll
we
second.
support that position.
Do we have it? Oh, no, oh, okay, I see, that's why you don't get ahead of your staff. All right, the next one. I think we wrote a letter in support of it already, but it may be good to get the borough board on record.
Sounds good.
So maybe next borough board week.
So have a motion ready then.
Yeah.
Have a letter ready.
Yeah. All right, thank you all for coming. We'll see you next borough board Monday, April 8th at 5:30.
Yep.